Welcome back, owls, to QT, Queer Temple. We are so excited to be in the TUTV studios for the first time, and we cannot wait to share the pride of Temple with you. Stay with us. Hello and welcome to QT, Queer Temple, the show in which we explore the world through the lens of LGBTQIA+ individuals. If you are a member of the queer community, your eyes are probably getting bigger and brighter when you are thinking about the month of June, Pride Month, yes! Here to talk about the highest celebration of the queer year are Laila Page, a journalism major and first-year student, Sean Driscoll, a communication studies major and junior, and Professor Brad Windhauser from the College of Liberal Arts. First up, I'm going to talk to Sean here in the studio. Thank you so much for coming, Sean.
Thanks for having me.
Would you please introduce yourself first?
I am Sean Driscoll. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a communication studies major. I am a junior and involved in Klein College as a peer mentor for the Klein Rising program.
Wow. In the introduction, we're just talking about June and Pride Month, but why are we celebrating Pride in June specifically?
So Pride Month gives us a chance to look back at the history, Stonewall riots, Christopher Street Liberation Day March, and a lot of the events that took place in June that have led us to where we are today. Okay,
wonderful. You took a Pride class here at Klein specifically. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in that class? What did you learn and who taught it?
Yes, so Dr. Godson taught the course. It revolved around learning about some of the history of movements and some of the great activists like Harvey Milk, Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera. And so we looked at films to look at that kind of stuff.
Okay, and one of the things that was part of that class was also that you would actually go to New York and celebrate Pride. Is that correct?
Yes, so then after learning about a lot of the history, we learned about how to really use that activism to get involved in real activism out there on the streets.
And that was in 2021, not the actual anniversary of Stonewall. We are still living in a pandemic. We're not wearing masks right now, but how did it feel? Because it was a totally different environment than we usually have Pride.
Yes, so there was a little bit of COVID anxiety, but it was really great to be able to be celebrating with everyone in person and being able to have that in-person experience and that sense of community really adds a different layer to it than any type of virtual thing could.
Did it feel more like a party, or was it an actual protest? Because that's one of the critiques that we hear so much, that it's either too much of a party. No, it's always too much of a party, yes. And it doesn't go back to the original Pride celebration with the Stonewall riots. So how did it feel this year specifically after we have the murder of George Floyd and COVID? So how did it feel this year?
I think because of COVID, it still felt like there was still a celebration going on. But it's always a protest. It's always pushing forward for more rights, for more people, inclusivity. But I think people were just so joyful and happy to be with their community again that it is still a celebration.
Okay, and I think that's important too, that we are not we should grieve, but not too much. We should also celebrate our pride. How would you say that your pride class experience contributed to the celebration of pride? Was it different than before?
Yeah, so I think learning the context of so much of pride really bolsters that, and learning about these people who have like fought and died for their rights, for the rights of everyone, and and people who get lost in the history that we need to, pull back up and learn about.
And we see a lot of posters at Pride. People are protesting for certain things. Was that different this year as well, or what themes did you see?
So something I noticed this year was a lot of intersectionality, and which was really great. A lot of specific groups, intersectionality of like certain religions or certain like cultural groups or stuff like that. And I think that's something that's so important, especially now that we remembered to always be inclusive and intersectional.
Yeah, specifically that we're not starting. I mean, not starting. That we stop whitewashing the Pride events and really honor Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P. Johnson, and everyone who was involved in Pride. Why do you think it is still important that we are marching for LGBTQIA+ rights?
Mm-hmm. So I think we see even today there's still issues, trans bathroom rights and stuff like that, all of trans rights and just trans people being murdered. We still have so many issues.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. You're going to still stay here for a little bit because we're going to have a conversation later on.
Thank you.
And stay with us for more QT in a bit. Temple University has a dedicated curriculum to learning about LGBTQIA+ lives, identities, and experiences. While Sean took a Pride class at Klein College, the College of Liberal Arts has an entire minor dedicated to lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender LGBTQ studies. To talk about the College of Liberal Arts minor and more, we invited Professor Brad Windhauser. Brad, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Would you please introduce yourself first?
Brad Windhauser. I use he, him pronouns. I've been at Temple since 2004, and I teach in, so LGBT studies is housed in gender, sexuality, and women's studies, and I also teach in the English department.
Oh, wonderful. Which is also in the College of Liberal Arts,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you call it CLA?
CLA.
Yeah, I always want to say COLA. I asked Sean about why is it important that we are still marching. I want to ask you, why is it important that Temple has an LGBTQ studies minor?
So the program itself has been around for about 13, 14 years, and it's relatively small, but there's a lot of classes that you can take. A lot of them are cross-listed across campus. And so to have this program really shines a light on our community. It allows students to investigate kind of what makes us tick, take things, learn stories that interest them and sort of apply their own interests, but also for people who are not in the community, learn about their friends, learn about their family members, things like that, and just some history.
Yeah, that was something that I was really interested in. If people who are not of the LGBTQIA+ community, if they also taking those classes, what are those classes? What can I imagine?
So we do have a slate of dedicated courses for the program. So we have 2 different film classes. There's a queer coming of age film class on the genre, queer representation, so they kind of balance each other out. Queer novels of the 20th century as well as the 21st century, so 2 different classes. 2 different creative writing classes, both fiction and nonfiction. Queer Lives, which is the core of the program, as well as gender studies. And that looks at how we've had to deal with the various decades that we've lived in, starting in the 1950s, coming all the way forward.
Okay.
There's also a social movements class.
Yeah, that's actually a very great transition to the question I wanted to ask you about. How are you teaching what I just talked to Sean about? How are you teaching Pride and not only the Stonewall riots, but how are you teaching Pride at in the minor?
All the different, well, so everyone handles it perhaps slightly differently, and each course asks for a different component of it. So for example, in Queer Lives, we go through a lot of the history. We look at what was happening in the 1950s, then the 60s and the 70s, so you can chart the evolution of our community. In our creative writing classes, it's about, for me, just being out, comes out of my mouth the first day of class. And, you know, I've been out since, you know, the mid-90s when I was 21, came out in San Diego. I'm from LA, but Southern California in general. And so just being out and having these conversations in a community that's more about us and it's about inclusivity, students really appreciate that. So there is that feeling when I say we, there's that, okay, I don't really get that in a lot of the other classes that I take. So it's nice to kind of feel that.
And when you're teaching specifically the Stonewall riots, I think for so many years it was who threw the first brick at Stonewall,
Yeah.
And we would so little talk about things like Sylvia Rivera or Marsha P. Johnson. So how are you teaching this specific moment? I guess my question is critical race theory part of LGBTQ studies?
Absolutely. You know, you can't talk about our community, particularly with Stonewall, without talking about all of the marginalized people, even within our community, who so often get overlooked. And not just within our community, but also, like you were talking about earlier, the whitewashing of Stonewall, that rather unfortunate Roland Emmerich film called Stonewall was all about white people. And so, and even when people have tried to put together historical films, there's a great PBS documentary called Stonewall Uprising, which talks to a lot of people who were there, but it's mostly white people. Unfortunately, a lot of the people of color who were there have passed, so they weren't around to actually be investigated. But if you don't know that, you get the wrong impression. So when I teach it, I happen to use that documentary, but I balance it out with a documentary on Marsha P. Johnson. You can find it on YouTube. It's called Pay It No Mind. And so in talking about using this, talks about a slice, this talks about a slice, and say kind of integrate multiple sources.
Yeah. Even though you are a West Coast person, do you teach about the Philadelphia, the local pride as well, the annual reminders?
So when we get to the 1960s, we talk about the Reminder Days, which started here in Philly, July 4th of 1965. And activists from Philadelphia, as well as Delaware, all the way to DC, and even as far north as New York, descended on Philadelphia to have these demonstrations called Reminder Days so they could remind people the promise of America, freedom, all of that, the birth of freedom. And that went on until right after Stonewall, when members or people who were so worked up over Stonewall that said, I know this is going on in Philadelphia, let's kind of go take part. And what the Reminder Days did is they put forward a very specific version of us, suits for men, women wearing dresses, trans community not represented, and they said we want to be normal just like everyone else. And people from New York who were wound up from Stonewall were not really interested in that assimilationist agenda, so they came as they were. And the people who are behind the Reminder Days said, this feels like it's gotten away from what we've done, let's just fold it into now what is now known as Pride.
Okay. I could talk for hours with you. Thank you so much for being here today. And up next, an interview with journalism major Laila Page. Stay with us. Covering LGBTQ pride and identities as a journalist can be interesting, let's say. It has been proven that diversifying newsrooms actually contribute to a better representation of LGBTQIA+ people, as well as intersecting other identities. I want to talk to you, Laila, about your ambitions as a journalist and about your personal experience. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Would you please introduce yourself first?
My name is Laila. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a freshman and I'm a journalism major.
Wonderful. And you just started, as you said, here at Temple. How was your LGBTQ experience before in your high school?
In high school, I was actually experiencing and figuring out my sexuality and who I was. In my generation, it is, and being in a public school, it is relatively open to the idea. So that was actually the first time I was, getting in touch with who I, really was. And I was in a straight relationship at the time, so I couldn't really do anything or have that time to actually look into myself and be like, no, this is who you are, and try new things and everything. But
Okay.
it was relatively open.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. How did you learn about Pride in school, like the events or queer history in general? Was that a topic or?
They had clubs. I remember one club was the Gay Straight Alliance. Unfortunately, I wasn't a part of it, which I really regret now because I really wasn't a part of really anything in high school because I was, again, trying to learn who I was. So that's why I'm here now to actually talk about the things I'm passionate about.
Right, but it was it part of the curriculum, like in
Oh,
the history
no.
class? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
very. We just had a conversation in class recently about that, and it turns out that we're up until this day not really teaching queer history in history classes. I want to talk to you about a very specific topic that we discussed with the other guests before, and that is intersectionality. And I actually wrote down that you are a Black, bisexual, and busy woman. So you have all these intersecting identities. How is your experience in the queer community different from mine, for example?
You know, to be specific, being Black is, it comes with a lot of disadvantages in society. So you're already, you know, looked down upon from other people. And then I'm also a woman. So I have a lot of other disadvantages, and I have to work twice as hard for what a straight or just normal white male would have. On top of that, I am bisexual. So it is kind of a complex and confusing thing for people who are bisexual, because other people are just like, well, how can you like both genders? You know, that doesn't make any sense, because usually the older generation has only heard of the lesbian and gay people. And then when they hear all about these other names, it's like, where did this come from, you know? But yeah, it comes with a lot of disadvantages, and I have to work twice as hard for the things that I want in life.
I'm very glad that you are also now part of our team. I'm very lucky to have you on board as a first-year student. I guess, how would you like to, you're going to graduate in about 4 years, how would you like to see the world, specifically the journalism world that you are going to enter at that point? How would you like to see it?
I would definitely like to see it more open. And by open, I mean other people learning about other things, and not just in their community, you know. And I want to write novels. That's why I am a journalism major, and I have 2 younger sisters. So what I want to do is I want them to look up to me and other people that are in my shoes and be like, well, this person is doing this. I want to replicate what she's doing, or this person inspires me. And I want to basically make, not a name for myself, but have my sisters look up to me, and if they were to follow in my shoes, have me be like a bigger person that they could like look up to.
Yeah. And I'm looking up to you, so I'm really thankful that you're here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be back in a moment with all of our guests for a group discussion, so please stay with us. Now that we have learned a bit more about our guests, I would like us to have a conversation about lived queer experiences. And my first question for all of you would actually be, what is your experience like here at Temple? And I would like to start with you, Brad, because you have quite a different than the 3 of us. So,
and also been here the longest. So I started here in 2004, and it wasn't something I really brought up. There wasn't a strong queer presence that I knew of, and it wasn't until I started doing more in LGBT studies around 2014 where I felt more empowered to talk about it in classes and whatnot, because so much has changed culturally. So like, for example, now, like even my straight classes, if I mention my husband, no one blanches, but like 10 years ago it would have been like, what?
Is there any form of faculty union of queer people, or?
There is a loose organization of queer affiliated faculty that get together periodically.
Okay.
Yeah, I know they exist. I haven't had a chance, being so busy, but yeah,
cool.
They exist.
And both of you are relatively fresh at Temple. You transferred into Temple. You just started at Temple. I guess I know that you are relatively involved. So tell me a little bit your queer experience here at Temple.
So I think it's been great. I think just you can randomly meet people. You could get involved in organizations. You can take courses, like we learned about, like the GREAT program. Or even just take Pride class. Like I got the VIP treatment though, because I came in and met Dr. Gratzman. Dr. Gratzman was like the first person I met, so he's a great advocate. Yes. So connect with people. It's really great. Yeah.
Okay. And you, Laila, have you started being involved in any specific clubs here?
Other than this, not yet. I think the most important thing that I did was meeting new people who are like me or who want to learn more what I go through in my shoes, you know? But I do think that's like the most important thing. But I am looking forward to, through my stay here, learning more about and meeting new people and getting more involved with things like this.
Let's do a little bit temple propaganda. Can we all agree on that we are feeling safe here on campus? Like, is this a safe space for everyone? I dress sometimes very androgynous, and even in those instances, even though I know that I am white and have different experiences, but I feel safe here on campus too. So yeah, I think Temple is doing a good job in terms of that. Let's talk about curriculums. Is there any specific class, anything in the curriculum that you would like to see on the board? And Brad, sorry, I have to go back to you right away.
Okay.
So is there any specific class where you're like, I wish we could bring that, we could push this specific class because I would love to teach it?
Part of what we're doing to grow the program is to reach out to other programs on campus and to try and, like all courses, or programs, we do well when we cross-list courses, bringing in students from other parts of campus. So I would love to get like the history of psychology and how they've treated us, mistreated us, those types of things, because I think it would be really useful. Nowadays, some people don't really know what they don't know. And so to get that kind of content out there is good.
Could you push that so we can get that class out?
Yeah. So it's something I want to work on this semester.
Perfect. Yeah. Sean, what about you? Is there any specific class where you're really passionate about X, Y, and Z?
I think I don't have an answer for that, but I just think participation. I think just knowing that you can take these classes and that there's like real knowledge that you can take out of them. They aren't just like classes to take for a credit. Like you can really develop your skills, whether it be communication or activism or anything, by taking some of these classes and getting involved.
I don't want to put you on the hot seat because I know that you are very fresh here. But do you know if there are any journalism classes that also intersect with queer identities?
Not that I know of. I would definitely like to learn more about it, and if there isn't, I maybe want to see if I could, because a goal of mine is to do something, an independent thing by myself and have everybody come into that. So if there isn't one, which I hope there really is, I would like to do something by myself and do that.
Maybe one thing, there's a class called Gender in American Mass Media, which is in the journalism department, and it's a really great class to learn about intersectionalities as well, which we talked about earlier. Yeah, I think the last thing that I would like you to do is another shout out to a queer person. I listened to this podcast called Query by Cameron Esposito. And at the end of each episode, she's asking the guests to shout out a queero, which could be a person, but it could also be a moment in pop culture maybe that inspired you in your queer identity. So I'm going to start with you, Sean. Who is your queero?
I would have two, Harvey Milk and James Baldwin, for different reasons. I really love Harvey Milk's dedication to grassroots activism, and I just love James Baldwin's just unrelenting literature and just never afraid to be himself.
Okay, and we don't like Anita Bryant, speaking of Harvey Milk, so. Laila, who's your queero?
I don't want to get on like the pop culture train or whatever, but I really love Lil Nas X.
Okay.
It's just like his attitude and how all the backlash that he's getting from the older generation and how he's marketing that into his new music videos and how he just takes all that in and uses that as motivation. I live for that. I want to be him so bad.
How did you like the new album?
I loved it. I loved all his music videos.
We'll bring that to Pride next year, and then we're gonna celebrate Pride together with Lil Nas X
yes,
here in Philly. Brad, who's your queero?
There's so many to choose from. For an author, I'd probably say Patricia Highsmith. She written a lot of books. The Talented Mr. Ripley is her series, but her first queer novel was The Price of Salt. It was made into the film Carol. And it was one of the first books to have an unapologetic look at who we are. It's a lesbian relationship, and it's not about being institutionalized or doesn't end in suicide or self-harm or anything like that. It's just two people trying to love each other in an unwelcoming society. And it's also an amazing book, so yeah.
That's great. Well, is there anything that we have not discussed today that you would like to talk about? That's the journalism rule number one, to ask that question at the very end. anything that you would like to shout out?
I would say one thing, not to cut you off, if you're about to say something, for anyone thinking about taking the LGBT studies minor, what's really good about it is, in addition to the courses, it's good on your CV. You know, oftentimes we have to take programs because we think it's going to lend into a job or a career or something like that, but it really balances out, at least to employers, that you know how to talk to people and you have empathy for communities, and especially underrepresented communities. So that could be good. Plug for my program.
Wonderful. I think we can wrap up the show. I'm really happy that you were all here. This was a great conversation, and we could continue with that conversation on and on. But we hope that you enjoyed our show today. In our next episode, we will be back in our home studios, but still loud and proud. And please stay safe, wear a mask, wash your hands, and practice safe sex. We'll see you soon.